Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speakin' Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. Excuse me. I am your host, Nick Bates. I'm joined along with our other host here, Ricardo Martinez Paz, and of course, we've got another episode cooked up for you guys, breaking down all the latest news. Even though we're kind of at a slow time for the NFL, talking about all the news surrounding the Steelers and Eagles, as well as going over our position breakdowns for the defensive backs for both of those teams. So I hope you all had a great 4th of July weekend last weekend. I hope you're all getting ready for another good weekend here. Hopefully you got something cooked up. And with that, I welcome in Ricardo, my man. How you feeling? How you doing today?
Pretty good, man. I'm a little, I wish there was more news to talk about, but, it's just that time of the year for the NFL, right before training camp starts and all that. So it's kind of like not surprising that it's a bit quiet at this time.
Yeah, it's definitely the dead time in the NFL of just like everything is slow. And it was actually interesting because I follow Mark Cabali, who's a beat writer for The Athletic, and he's one of my favorites who covers the Steelers. And he was like, I think it was him. He was the one who was talking about it. And he was like, this is the only real holiday. 4th of July is the only real holiday that like NFL coaches and executives can really just kind of sit back and relax and not like have any major event going on or like get prepared for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because everything else, there's always something going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, I didn't think about it like that. That's a good point. But
Yeah. I mean, it's a grind, but it's also like it's the NFL. So
yeah, exactly.
I guess you take a little of this, you give a little of that, and it all works out in the end.
Yeah.
So we do have some news to talk about though, because our old pal, or at least the Steelers' old pal from the AFC North, Baker Mayfield, was dealt. He's gone. He's out of here. He is now a Carolina Panther. He was traded this past week. Baker Mayfield sent to the Panthers in exchange for a conditional 5th-round pick, which could become a 4th if certain metrics are met, whatever they are. I don't have them in front of me. And then when it comes to the salary cap aspect of it, which is obviously a big deal, the Browns are retaining $10.5 million of it. The Panthers are picking up $4.8 million of it, plus the rest of it being potentially made up in incentives, depending on how he performs. I don't believe those incentives have been made public yet. But Mayfield even restructured his contract a little bit to get out of there and get to Cleveland. So this is something that we've kind of seen coming for a little bit. I think we talked about it for a little bit last episode. But now that the trade is over, what did you think of this, Ricardo?
I mean, it made sense for all parties, I guess. I guess the Browns in this sense are both winners and losers. Winners because obviously they're getting rid of a quarterback who they basically ruined the relationship with. So that's one less person to worry about, I guess. But now they have Brissett, obviously, who's most likely going to take over, assuming Deshaun Watson's suspended for a season. But they're also losers because they have to pay $10.5 million of that salary. So they just kind of have to eat that, deal with it, bite the bullet, and move on, I guess. And like for the Panthers, I guess it's a bit of an upgrade, a little upgrade over Sam Darnold. Although Baker was playing with an injury last season, he played through it, so he didn't really play all that well. But it's a fresh start for him, which hopefully, I mean, I like. Well, I mean, I know you're a Steelers fan, so maybe you weren't a fan of watching Baker Mayfield play, but I hope that he can rejuvenate his career, revive it with the Panthers. We'll see what happens with Sam Darnold. I mean, they're saying that he won't get traded and all this, but I don't know.
Well, see, that's where it's so interesting to me because it's like you've got when I look back on that draft class yesterday, just because I was like, man, like that turned out the way that no one expected. Like, first of all, no one expected Mayfield to go first until he was actually selected by the Browns on that draft night.
Yeah.
But now you've got in that Panthers QB room, you've got the 1st overall pick and the 3rd overall pick from that draft class. Josh Rosen, who went 10th overall, isn't even in the league anymore.
No.
And then you've got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who turned out to be the stars from that class. So, I mean, what do you think? Because I feel like that's kind of the question now. And I've always been a Sam Darnold guy. I know you just said you're a Baker Mayfield guy, but like I know this isn't speaking Panthers here, but I mean, well, just real quick because it is a slow time for Steelers and Eagles. I mean, what do you think? Do you think you think Sam Darnold's getting traded because they also brought in Matt Corral in the draft?
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, with Corral, you're gonna have him as your 3rd QB. Like, but do Russ really want to? Yeah, like he's more of a project. He's not really going to give you much this season. I mean, if you keep Darnold, I feel like that's fair for at least this season. Even if, Baker Mayfield wins and gets the starting job, starting against the Browns, which is funny, week 1. But I don't know. I think just to be safe for the Panthers, I would say just to keep him for now, and maybe who knows, Sam Darnold will actually win the starting job come week 1, but we never really know. Honestly, it's that's a bit of a tough one. I don't know.
You also got to think of it too from the perspective of the Panthers and having Matt Rule there. I mean, he's got to have. He's fighting for his job. So, I mean, like, if you're going to just roll with exclusively Baker Mayfield, as long as there's no disturbances there with having Sam Darnold, I mean, you're going to want another option rather than having to go to Matt Corral or XFL standout PJ Washington. I don't even remember if that was his name, but that guy was in their quarterback last year. It was some. I think he was PJ something. Though, yeah, but so for me, it's like if there's no disruption there between Darnold and Mayfield, I think you got to kind of keep him there as that backup because I think Rule's going to want someone else there to potentially, help save his job should anything happen to Baker Mayfield that you could potentially go with. But I agree. I think it's also I'm interested to see what Mayfield can do because he did show flashes of success with the Browns, and a lot of that too was the fact that he went through 3 head coaches there. One of them was Hugh Jackson, who will kind of excuse. And I guess you could kind of excuse Freddie Kitchens to a certain extent too.
Oh boy,
it's not like you were getting much out of him, but then the relationship obviously got fractured with Kevin Stefanski, and I mean, it's just tough because now you look at the Browns QB room and it's like, man, if Deshaun Watson gets suspended and you got to roll with Jacoby Brissett and Josh Dobbs is the only other quarterback in that room, I mean, it would have been nice if you could have found a way to keep Baker Mayfield, even if there is a little bit of friction between him and Stefanski, just because it's like, what other option do you have? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean that at that point the relationship was just unfixable. Like you could not like at that point just nah. I think it made sense to move on from both standpoints. But yeah.
Do you think that there's anything else the Browns could potentially do? Now we'll shift it back to because obviously we'll shift it back to the AFC North here a little bit because now we've seen the fact that the Browns are likely without Deshaun Watson. They've also in a tough spot with their quarterback room. We've addressed both of those. Do you think that they go out and they try and get something else for that quarterback room? I mean, the way that Deshaun Watson's contract is structured, they're not really stuck with the salary cap. I'm no salary cap expert when it comes to the NFL specifically. I get a little mixed up in it with specifically the way that the salary cap works for the NFL. But I was doing some numbers, and they should still have a decent amount of cap space. Do you think you could see them potentially adding someone else to that room?
I mean, yeah, probably add some like other veteran. I don't really. I mean, it makes no sense now to add another player via trade. So you just gotta, I guess, go with the free agents that are available. I think it would make sense for them to add someone else, just to have it like a security blanket. But yeah, if it's just gonna be Dobbs as your backup, I don't think that's a very viable option.
Well, let me give you this scenario. And again, this is all based on my very rudimentary understanding of the NFL salary cap. So I don't want to. So if I sound like an idiot here to anyone who looks back on this when they watch this in the future, and they say, what is this guy thinking with the salary cap and how all these contracts work? Just know that this was for me trying to crunch the numbers. So when I was looking into it, this was mainly according to Spotrac, but I used a couple other resources as well.
Yeah.
The Browns, for all their dead money included, their top 51 guys and their entire roster, they have, according to Spotrac, $21.3 million in salary cap room. And when it comes to just their top 51 contracts, they have $48.7 million in cap room. If you make it work with the San Francisco 49ers to crunch the money a little bit, I think you could get Jimmy Garoppolo in there. I don't know what you'd have to give up in a trade, but when it comes to the numbers, you could make it work. He's only got 1 year left on his contract, and then Deshaun Watson can come in next year with his monstrous $230 million deal and be the riding horse, the cowboy on the riding horse that the Browns gave away everything to get.
Oh man, to me that makes absolutely no sense from the Browns' point of view, but it also does because the Browns would do something like that. I mean, they just traded 3 first rounders for Deshaun Watson, someone who's not going to play this upcoming season. And so, like, if they have the salary cap to do it, I guess I could see where they would do it. They give up maybe like a 4th rounder. I don't know. I mean, I don't think the Niners are going to really get much for Garoppolo at this point, but
I agree. I don't think it's going to be much for Garoppolo. I think the main thing would be you'd have to make the cap work, but I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, does it completely make no sense to point that it's off the rails? Because at the end of the day, they could still go out and yes, if they make the cap structure work, but if you're only giving up a 4th round pick, it's not like you're giving up that much when you've already given up basically all your major future assets
That's
into
yeah,
getting Deshaun Watson. And like I said, his salary cap hit really doesn't only hurt the team until next season. And this season, you've already got a roster that's kind of ready to go. I mean, we've talked
yeah.
about it. They've got the talent there. They built it up. They made some offseason moves for Deshaun Watson to come in and be the piece that takes him over the top. And now that he's not going to be there, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy who's been to the Super Bowl with the 49ers before. So I don't know if it makes no sense at all.
I just the fact that you're giving up more draft picks, more potential players in the future, just to me is like, nah. Why would you do that? You've already traded away so many of your asses, like you said. So it's like, really, you're just gonna lose out. I mean, yeah, try and win now, sure, but like long term, you're just screwing yourself over.
Giving up more assets. All right, I hear you on that one. So what do you think when it comes to the AFC North specifically? Let's assume Deshaun Watson suspended for the year, no Baker Mayfield. The Browns roll with Jacoby Brissett and the rest of that Super Bowl ready roster. And then you've also got the defending AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. You've got the Ravens, who are going to get healthy again this year. And you've got the Steelers with one of the best coaches in the NFL and a roster that's pretty solid outside of some questions at a few positions, including quarterback. Where does it stack up here? Where do the Browns fit into that division?
I mean, I sort of touched on it last week. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up like last, but I think third would be more reasonable, I guess. And maybe Steelers last because of question marks at QB as well and other positions. But yeah, I don't see them winning the division. I don't really like if you bring in Garoppolo, maybe, but with Brissett, he's only going to take you so far, and it's really I don't think he's going to outduel like Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow when it comes down to divisional games, at least. So yeah, I don't see them finishing any higher than third, really.
I agree with you there. I think third is their ceiling, but I do think that it's going to come down. I think they're going to be the fourth team. And I mean, I was just writing down this note because this is something we got to get into in a later episode. But I feel like part of the reason that the Steelers are concerning is the fact that, yes, they've got the rookie QB, and yes, they've got Mitch Trubisky, who's still got a ton to prove. But the fact that they're also rolling with Matt Canada, who's already got question marks as the offensive coordinator.
Right.
And like I said, we got to take more of a dive into the Steelers and their situation surrounding Matt Canada now, and more of his college style offense that's talked about a lot. But I mean, when it comes to that, I see the Browns with Jacoby Brissett and that current situation. I would pick them. I don't want it to sound a little biased here because of course I am a Steelers fan and obviously we're talking about them, but I would have them as fourth in the division starting out and definitely no higher than third given their current situation.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Yeah.
All right, so that being said, I think we covered pretty much everything we wanted to talk about with Mayfield and the Browns in the AFC North. So I guess we can move on to our position breakdowns for the defensive backs. And we go back and forth every week just to update everybody. We've got our little chart here. We got Steelers. Steelers had the better special teams and linebackers. Eagles with the better D-line so far.
Yeah.
Today we're going with the defensive backs. And the Eagles are first this week. So, Ricardo, I'll let you just kind of open it up. Why don't you start with the cornerbacks first if there's any general stuff you want to get into, and then we can elaborate on it.
Yeah, I mean, first off, this could be a really interesting comparison in terms of secondaries. I feel like they're pretty like solid both all around. So, I mean, getting into the Eagles cornerbacks, at least obviously Darius Slay. He's over 30 now, and I mean, he's not. I don't think he's slowing down. I mean, he still played fairly well a season ago. Came up with 3 interceptions and quite a few touchdowns, defensive touchdowns. So, I mean, he's still very much a playmaker, and I'm not so worried about him. James Bradbury, that signing from the Giants, which I thought was a pretty good one, adding another veteran in the mix for a young secondary, really, other than Darius Slay. It's sort of another leader, more experience, which is always good. So, I mean, yeah, it was a 1-year, $7.25 million deal from the Giants. He had 4 interceptions last season, looking into the stats, which I thought was pretty good. And I mean, I like that pairing. I'm just envisioning the starting lineup would be Darius Slay and James Bradbury on opposite sides of each other with who is it? Why am I blanking on his name?
Maddox?
Yes, Avonte Maddox. Yes, Claude. Yeah, he had a pretty solid season too. I also love watching Maddox play overall. He's pretty aggressive, pretty physical when it comes to jamming receivers up the line and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
He's
73 total
also
tackles last year was the highest of his career as well. He had a
yeah,
good
I
year
was
last
about to
year.
say he's progressing pretty well, I would say, and it's going to be a second year, just like for other like for Darius Slay and other players. It's the second year in Jonathan Gannon's system, who typically like as I've mentioned a couple of times, right, he's more conservative play caller. So I think
Well, I actually, real quick, I wanted to ask you about how you think the fact that you have Darius Slay and especially James Bradbury played a ton of man when he was with the Giants, and now you've got
yeah,
Darius Slay, who's also been a lockdown corner throughout a lot of his career. And I know Jonathan Gannon was criticized a little bit last year, and he does like to run a lot of zone. Do you think he's going to be changing his scheme a lot this year to get these guys into more man coverage?
I think he'll definitely like adjust to what his players are better at. So James Bradbury obviously being better in man, Darius Slay can play man as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he like changed it a little bit. Although obviously his forte is more zone coverage stuff like that. So trying not to get beat over the top easily. But I think Slay and Bradbury can hold their own most like more often than not. So I wouldn't be surprised, yeah, if we like shifted our defense more towards man coverage. But yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting point I didn't think about. But yeah, so I guess moving on to
Well,
safe.
real quick, because I have one other thing I want to touch on with the corners.
Yeah,
So real quick, because I'm in agreement with you, Bradbury and Slay. That's a great duo that you got there, and Maddox is one of the best slot corners in the NFL, especially after last season. And Bradbury too was also a Pro Bowler 2 years ago, and I mean he did take a little bit of a step back like last year, but I think you're liking what you have out of those top three guys, no doubt. But how confident are you in this cornerback group if one of these guys were to get hurt and what you have after there? That's where the big question
um,
comes to me because you're looking at a lot of guys. You're looking at a couple rookies last year in McPherson and Gowan, and
yeah,
a couple other
yeah.
guys who are still kind of unproven that they brought in. So I mean, how much of a concern is that for you that you're one injury away from some trouble?
I mean, oof. Yeah, that's a good point. I would be a little concerned, at least. I mean, yes, there would be some concern if one player, if either Bradbury or Slay went down with an injury, but if one of them were to, then well, let's say Slay gets down, I'd say goes down. I'd say Bradbury takes his spot, and then McPherson probably takes Bradbury's. But that being said, I think he would need more help on the defense, like have more safeties geared towards him, linebackers and coverage and stuff like that, because he still is young. He's a
Absolutely.
former fourth rounder.
He also
So
primarily we're talking about McPherson, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I think he also played the majority of his snaps on special teams last
Yeah,
year.
I was gonna say he's more of a special teamer. So I mean, I'm not sure how well he's developed this offseason. I haven't really seen many things written
Yeah.
about
I mean,
him.
the Eagles also didn't have the mini camp, so
Right,
we
right.
haven't seen a lot at this point. But yeah,
Yeah, Sirianni's been a bit passive or like not as what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more like he's a bit more
I,
like trying to preserve players for
yeah,
the training camp stuff like that for the season, hoping that they won't get injured later on, stuff like that. But yeah, it would definitely be a concern if one of them went down, but it would be even more concerning if both went down. I'm
oh,
hoping
then
that
then you're then the Eagles are in
then it's like
serious trouble.
then the Eagles are screwed. That's yeah, but we have, I mean, there's potential at least to build off
Yeah,
of last season for McPherson and other
and it
younger
would be
corners.
great. It would definitely be great if these guys could all stay healthy throughout training camp and come into the regular season. You have those three great corners covering the slot and obviously the two outside spots, and then you kind of let McPherson and Gowan and some of these other guys get more experience and limited reps in case you are to need them later on in the season. So I mean, definitely a little more
Yeah,
top heavy at this point, but yeah,
yeah,
I'm with you there.
yeah. So I guess moving on to safeties, we touched on Jaquiski Tart, who the Eagles signed a couple weeks ago. It was the first episode we talked about him, or the
Yeah,
second one, but
first or second, one of them.
yeah. And so yeah, that was a 1 year deal from the Niners. And I remember saying something along the lines of like basically with the Niners, whenever he was on the field, the defense allowed fewer yardage, fewer touchdowns, all that kind of stuff. And when he wasn't on the field, the Niners defense allowed more like higher stats and stuff like that. So I mean, good for depth purposes at least. We have Tart in that safety room. Um, And Anthony Harris, I was reading something yesterday on Bleeding Green Nation saying how he was like, maybe like, I remember the first was like, maybe he's not as bad as people think he is. He was, he was like just bang on just like average, which is fine. It's just long term, that's not really going to help. I mean, and then we have Kayvon Wallace, who's a former fourth rounder from a couple years ago, really hasn't developed into the safety that the Eagles expect him to be. He's more of a special teamer. So, him, if he were to step in, he's probably the fourth safety at this point. But if you know, if Anthony Harris or Hart were to go down, or Marcus Epps even, that I feel like that would spell trouble for the Eagles secondary, for the safeties especially. But it's I feel like secondary the last couple seasons has been a bit iffy. Now it's a bit more. I feel a bit better about it. Still not totally sure about it. It's not the weak. It's more in the middle for me in terms of the three units. Defensive line obviously being the strongest, and then linebackers probably still being the weakest, and secondary I think it's right in the middle of those three groups. I would say position groups.
So I'm trying to think of how to phrase this because it's interesting because I feel like a lot is going to kind of be relied on Marcus Epps this year. And you just talked about kind of like the mediocrity, I guess, of Anthony Harris. So what do you think is more likely? Do you think Anthony Harris takes a drastic step back or Marcus Epps takes a drastic step forward? I guess I'm saying at the end of the season, who do you think is the best safety in this group?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I would say probably Epps. I could see him starting over Harris at the end of the season, just because Anthony Harris was so inconsistent last season, yet somehow very much average. So I feel like the inconsistency is gonna like limit some of his playing time, perhaps this upcoming season. And Tart not really coming off a great season last year with the Niners, but still adds a veteran presence, so he could take some of his snaps as well. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Epps like started or continued to start to see continue to like play throughout the season, really as the starter. But
I think
Wallace,
like Malcolm. I think Malcolm Jenkins even came out and said like a couple weeks ago, like Eagles fans should be excited about Marcus Epps. Like he can handle this job for sure.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah,
like gave a lot of praise to him, which for what it's worth, I mean, you'd rather hear that than I guess hear nothing, right?
that's true. Yeah,
About what could potentially come on Marcus Epps. I mean, of course, the guy's going to back up his former teammate. He's not going to diss him if they don't have any beef in the past. But
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think you can be cautiously optimistic about Marcus Epps, but I mean, at the end of the day, is it fair to say that I think the main expectation for the safety group, and I know that Kayvon Wallace took less snaps in his second year than he did his rookie year, and a part of that was due to injury. But
Right.
is it fair to say that you need at this point in their careers, you either need Marcus Epps or Kayvon Wallace? One of them needs to step up and just take one of these starting safety spots.
Yeah,
Like
I
both
would.
guys
Yeah,
have slowly progressed. Marcus Epps a bit more than Kayvon Wallace. One of them needs to step up in training camp and say, "Hey, I'm going to be one of the two starting safeties in this unit."
yeah, no, definitely. Especially because we have Tart on a 1 year deal. We have Harris on a 1 year deal too. So they're not really long term solutions. They're more just band aids. They're temporary. So Epps, yeah, I would imagine he will step up. I think he will. Wallace, I assume if he stays healthy, maybe, but I still don't see him really making or like having that too many snaps
Mhm.
on defense at least. Special teams, yeah, he'll play plenty, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's I don't know, I'm a bit mixed about the safeties. Corner, I'm definitely more. I feel a bit better about
Yeah,
the safety.
yeah, as you should. So, I mean, one other question that I have for the safety group here is surrounding Tart, I guess. Do you think it's more likely that he ends up being a starter or that he's like the third safety that kind of rotates in and can play down in the box a little bit? And I guess what would you rather have his role be? Would you rather have his role be a starting safety or would you rather have his role be more of that third safety?
Um, I'd say for now, definitely coming off the bench, more of as a third safety. Just because I mean, yeah, he's experienced. He's got plenty of years, like 8 years in the league now. But he's not exactly the youngest player
Yeah.
on in that secondary. So I mean, it's for managing snaps and stuff for to like try and maintain like player health and stuff like that. I would imagine he would probably come off like as a third safety. But I mean, I'd be fine with that. If he starts, then so be it. Then he beats someone out, and
Yeah,
clearly, then
that's
at that
true.
point, the Eagles see something in him that he doesn't, and that they don't see in one of
And
the
like
other
and like you said,
safeties.
you brought up that stat before that like when he was on the field for the Niners, they were doing well.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see how training camp goes and preseason, all that stuff. But yeah, safety, I'm definitely a bit on, on the fence about. But yeah,
Yeah. All right, sounds good. Well, I guess we'll move on to the Steelers now. And this is another kind of interesting position group for them because there's always, we say this every week, I guess, but there's always question marks and then there's things you're pretty sure about.
yeah,
So I guess I'll start with the corners a little bit. And I guess the theme with the corners throughout the offseason has kind of been you've got guys who are all really solid. You've got three guys at the top: Cam Sutton, Levi Wallace, and Akella Witherspoon, who are all really good and can be really good second options at the cornerback position. But you don't really have that guy who's your true number one corner, which I get to a certain degree. And I think we saw Wallace last year with Buffalo. He was like a true number two corner. Cam
yeah.
Sutton last year with Joe Hayden was a true number two corner.
Hmm.
And even Akilla Witherspoon at the end of the season was really getting reps to the point of being kind of that second option at corner. So I think that's where the main question has to be is who's going to kind of step up and be the leader of that cornerback room. And I want it to be Cam Sutton. It's got to be Cam Sutton. He was the guy you re-signed. I think it was a year or two ago. They re-signed him to the 3-year deal over Mike Hilton, who was the great slot cornerback. And he actually played inside a lot more. Played a bunch of his snaps inside. He actually was second on the entire defense in snaps last year. So, I think Cam Sutton's the guy that's kind of got to step up. He had career highs in tackles last year, and really had a solid season last year too. It was a solid season. So I think if he can step up, and I think the expectation is that he's going to kind of be that number one corner, whether he's ready for it or not. And then you're going to kind of have Witherspoon. Hopefully, he can replicate the end of last season, where the last like 4, 5, 6 games he played really well. Hopefully, he can be that second option, and then you bring Levi Wallace in when you're in sub packages and move Cam Sutton inside. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the situation of where the corner room is kind of laying out right now at the top of that, out of the top of that position group.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty solid group, honestly. That signing from Buffalo, yeah, Levi Wallace, I thought was really really good on the Steelers' part.
It was one of their underrated moves of the offseason because it
Yeah,
was
no,
something
for
that they
sure.
didn't necessarily have to add. But
Yeah,
like, and even though he's not going to be your top corner, and who knows if Witherspoon plays really well, he's not going to be your second corner. But he's one of those additions that for depth and for just getting an experienced guy in there who had a solid season last year, even played some of the number one corner last year for Buffalo when Tre'Davious White was hurt. That's a really solid under the radar addition, I thought.
yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, yeah, like you said, it wasn't really necessary, but it's good for depth and experience. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think the biggest question with the corners right now is I guess the biggest question is who is the corner two? Because, like I said, Cam Sutton's kind of going to be the de facto corner one. So,
Yeah,
who's going to be the corner two? Is it going to be Wallace or Witherspoon? And can Witherspoon, if he can replicate what he did at the end of last season, it's Witherspoon. If he can't, you've got the experienced, solid Levi Wallace who had a good year last year. And I think that's kind of how it's going to break down over who's going to start when it comes to the corners. And then, obviously, I think depth is a question because outside of those guys, you want to see one of those two step up and be the second option. But then
yeah,
outside of that, you've got Justin Lane, who was a 3rd-round pick a couple of years ago. I don't really see him making the roster unless he has a really good year. Primarily played special teams last year, only 28 snaps on D last year. And they actually just brought in Miles Boykin, the wide receiver, who is better as the gunner than he is on special teams. And James Pierre really kind of started to fall off as the season went on last year. So the depth kind of becomes an issue there. And I think we're going to kind of see it become Justin Lane versus James Pierre for that 4th corner spot. And then we're going to see it be Arthur Mollett, who's more of a slot corner, versus Trey Norwood, who's kind of like a safety slot
yeah.
corner hybrid, over who's going to be kind of that 5th corner slash backup slot corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, yeah, depth it might be an issue, but it's if they all stay healthy, those three guys, then I'm sure that they'll be fine. Especially when obviously we get to Minka. You got safety
I
Minka.
think that these guys you can be confident enough they're going to hold down the fort for the most
Yeah,
part.
I think you should be confident, and as well as other Steelers fans. Really, it's pretty solid overall, that group.
Here's a question I have from your outsider perspective, because the Steelers have everything I've heard this offseason about the Steelers and what their plan is on defense, they seem completely against the idea of bringing Joe Hayden back even on a 1-year deal. I mean, to me, it's like, what's the harm in giving this guy like a 1-year, $2 million contract? You've got the cap space for it. Bring him back in. He had a decent enough season last year. He provides some veteran experience. And, I don't see the harm in bringing him back. He's been great for your organization since you got him off from the Browns
Yeah.
a few years ago. I don't see the harm in bringing him back on a 1-year deal if it's for the cheap, especially because I don't know if any other teams are interested in him, but he's still unsigned at this point as we're heading into mid-July.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. That one, he's still unsigned. The Steelers haven't brought him back, but
It just seems like they're against bringing him back, I get they have options here, but
yeah, I was gonna say maybe the reason they don't re-sign him is because they have options now. They have Levi Wallace and the other two, obviously, but maybe they feel like those three are good enough as is, which is why they might not feel like bringing Joe Hayden back, especially because Hayden's what now, like almost mid-30s now.
yeah,
Something
he's
like
got to
that.
be up. He's got to be up around 32 at
He's
least.
he's up there, yeah, in age. But I feel like that might be the primary reason as to why they're not bringing him back. But yeah, like you said, he's done like fairly well for the Steelers since they brought him in. Um, maybe if someone goes down, if he's still around as a free agent, then maybe they'll bring him back. There's always that option, but who knows? Yeah, like injuries happen, and so if someone goes down like during training camp or something like that, then maybe they bring him back.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it makes sense. Like I said, I'm not opposed if they brought him back now, but I think your logic makes a ton of sense as to why they're not. And you don't really want to create any friction if they believe in the other three guys they've got there, and what they have for depth as well. As for expectations for the corners, I mean, I don't have any specific stat wise. I'd like to see Sutton kind of replicate his 50 tackles and get more than just the 2 interceptions he had last year. But outside of that, I guess the main thing I really feel like if Witherspoon can replicate and be the guy he was at the end of the season, that would be huge for the defensive backs here in this corner position. So I really just want to see either Witherspoon or Levi Wallace come out in training camp and kind of like I said between Kayvon Wallace and Marcus Epps, I want to see Witherspoon and Wallace. Which one of these guys is going to grab the second cornerback spot by the balls and say, "This is mine. I'm going in. This is mine." So that's what I want to see there. And then, I mean, outside of that, I mentioned Trey Norwood, and this is more of a depth thing, but I'd love to see him step up. He got a ton of snaps early on at the start of his rookie season, then started to fall off a little bit, and Arthur Mollett played better. And I do think it's going to be a battle between Mollett and Norwood, which one of those guys makes the roster. And I think Norwood's more valuable because he can play the spot and provide depth at safety, which I'm going to get into in a second.
Yeah.
So if he could win out that spot, I'd really like to see that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've got for the corners. I'll move on to the Steelers at this point, or excuse me, for the safeties at this point. And yeah, it starts with Minkah Fitzpatrick. You got the 4-year, $73 million extension. And hey, the Steelers locked down the third of their three staples on defense of TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Boom. They're all locked down for the foreseeable future here. You got to get excited about that. I'm excited about that. I talked a couple episodes about it. I know there was some question about is he worth that money? He also had a down statistical year last year. Some of the lowest totals of his career. It was also the lowest PFF grade of his career as well. But I like the signing, and he's a guy that I hope this year. He actually was up in tackles last year. The highest tackles, I think he had 124 was the number. Yeah, 124 tackles last year, which was a career high for him. I wouldn't even mind seeing that number come down a bit and get back more into like the 90 to 100 range if you can get the interceptions back up a little bit and be more used as like a playmaker and be all over the field and be more of a disruptor and be able to step up in kind of however it's needed. So that's more of the role I'm looking for him. I don't know. Real quick before I get into the other stuff, what are your thoughts on Fitzpatrick and just kind of those expectations I laid out for him?
I feel those expectations are perfectly reasonable. I don't see why he wouldn't be able to accomplish those. I mean, he's. I feel like he's normally all over the field anyway. I feel like he just flies everywhere. I just love watching him play. Just like the number of times I swear he jumped interceptions and stuff like that. Like those plays, I feel like I always remember of his because he's just that good. He's just that smart, that athletic, great range. So like I think for what it's worth, the money was absolutely deserved. Even if he did have a statistically like not as strong year a year ago, but still, I think he's. I mean, it's great that they locked him down for the foreseeable future. Definitely worth
I,
the money.
I think a big part of it too is like the reason his tackles were so up, and maybe he was down a little bit when we're talking about his coverage ability, is because the Steelers' defensive line was so banged up that teams were running all over them, especially in the latter half of the season. So he
Yeah,
was really relied on to come up and step up and make tackles, and he did it pretty well. So I think the fact that now they added reinforcements to the defensive line, he's going to go back to being kind of more that free roamer, be the center fielder at the safety position, be more of a playmaker on the back end. So I'm excited to see him, try and get back to that all pro form that he was, not last year, but the 2 years prior. Um,
yeah,
outside of Fitzpatrick in the safety group, they brought back Terrell Edmonds on the 1 year deal when he didn't get much interest from any of the team on the free agent market, which was good. He's steadily progressed throughout the years. He was really good 2 years ago. He was good again last year. His numbers have been pretty steady over the years, 63 tackles this last season, 2 interceptions, which matched his career high. And
hmm
hey, he's not going to jump off the pages as the most talented guy on this roster, but he's a guy that's on that back end at the strong safety position. He's no Troy Polamalu at strong safety, but hey, he's solid enough. All right, he gets the job done, especially when Minka Fitzpatrick is complimenting him. And another really under the radar move, even more under the radar in the offseason than bringing in Levi Wallace, was bringing in Damontae Kazee as kind of that third safety, because you bring him in. He's got experience playing both free safety and strong safety, so he can back up both of these guys. He'll slot in there as that third safety. You can kind of thin out the other guys in the safety room. You'll probably keep Miles Killebrew because he's a special teams machine. He had
yeah,
335 snaps at special teams. He's a beast on special teams. But you don't really need to add anybody else. And if Trey Norwood, like I mentioned, can beat out Arthur Maulette, he's some safety depth there as well as being depth at the slot corner, sub package position. So I really like the Kazee move. I thought it was super under the radar. And if he could just be that third safety, simple as that, give these guys a little bit of a break, be a good backup for him, play both of these positions, I'll be perfectly happy with that, and I'll be really happy with the safety room.
So what do you expect for Kazee, at least for Damontae Kazee, in terms of like how he's going to contribute?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just as simple as that. If either of these guys, I don't expect Fitzpatrick and Edmonds to have to come off the field a lot, but who
Yeah,
knows? Like I've said, we've seen Edmonds progress. But let's say he takes a step back this year. At least you've got Kazee there who can fill in, but also just to kind of, like I said, give him some rotational snaps, give these guys a little bit of a break. He can play both positions. And if you have that injury that goes down, I'm a lot more excited that it's Damontae Kazee who's filling in rather than Miles Killebrew, who's a career special teamer,
yeah,
or
yeah,
Trey Norwood, who's unproven, or Carl Joseph, who's likely going to get cut now that Kazee's here. I really like this addition. And he's got starter experience, and he's going to be your
yeah,
third safety. So I love the acquisition.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't think about it like that. I think he's pretty underrated. Yeah, it's definitely underrated. It provides more security at the safety position. If, like you said, if Edmonds doesn't perform exactly the best, or like injury happens and stuff like that. So, and the fact that he's
Yeah.
played both positions is great. I mean,
No,
yeah,
I would almost even say this is the type of acquisition. It's like a little bit of a Jaquiski Tart on steroids, because like it's a good move. At the end of the day, like obviously Tart's probably going to be a little more needed because
yeah,
the starting safeties for the Eagles aren't at the same caliber as Fitzpatrick and Edmonds.
right.
But like the fact that he could just kind of be that third safety in depth, I think is a perfect role. And if Epps and Harris can step up, and that's Tart's role, I think you could see both these guys deployed in very similar manners.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see what happens. Let's hope that none of them get injured. But
Yeah, and let's hope that Fitzpatrick, Edmonds, Epps, and Harris are all living up to their expectations. Obviously, they're going to be a little bit. Fitzpatrick's are going to be a little bit more lofty than the other three guys.
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a star.
So I don't really have much else to add at this point. With the safeties, the corners for the Steelers, I don't know if you do, but I think we can get into that point of the episode here where this guy's he's getting brought back out here. So I don't know. What do you think here? What are your thoughts with which group is better?
This is really, really tough. I
This
knew
is the
I was
toughest one
gonna.
we've had so far.
Yeah,
Toughest one we've had
absolutely.
so far.
Yeah. Man, because I'm trying to think about it. Right, the Steelers have three solid corners. They've got Minka, who's really good as is. They got Edmonds, who's solid all around.
Mm-hmm.
So, like overall, that secondary is pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about them really. As for the Eagles, I feel like, man. But then the question with the Steelers also is like the depth. But then the same can be applied, I guess, for the Eagles as well. But oh my goodness,
It's back and forth a lot. Because I agree with you. I think that the upside for this corner group for the Eagles is much higher than the Steelers. I mean, you could have a potential All-Pro in Darius Slay and a potential Pro Bowler in James Bradbury there, and Avonte Maddox could be by the end of the year. Who knows? If he has a great season, he could be the best slot cornerback in the NFL. So the upside is there with the Eagles, but they do have the question marks at safety, whereas the Steelers are more sure at the safety position. But then again, you also need someone to step up at the corner position. So, I mean, I don't know if this is going against the rules, but I would vote to separate the two out into two separate positions and say give the Steelers safety and give the Eagles corner. I don't know if that's shortchanging it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, yeah, I would agree with that. That's the only way I can see dividing this up, because it's just like if you pair them both together, it's like very even. Like yeah. So
if you want to do that, are we going to roll with that? We'll split it up, safeties and corners.
Yeah. Let's do that, because that makes sense.
I don't want to shortchange either position group, because I feel like we'd be shortchanging the DBs of one team or the other if we tried to keep it together.
Exactly.
Like that. And they are deployed. The way that safeties and corners are used, obviously, are deployed in much different ways. So I think this is the best way to kind of go about it.
Yeah.
So I like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Safety goes to the Steelers, corner goes to the Eagles. We got it settled for you.
So it's 3-2 still. Steelers are up.
3-3, Steelers are up. And next week we're getting exciting because we're switching over to the offense.
Yes, I'm excited.
So everybody, you're going to want to tune in for that episode for sure. I think we got offensive line first, but who doesn't like talking about the big man up front?
I love it.
Some of the best stuff to talk about.
Exactly. There's so much to talk about there on both fronts.
Maybe we'll have a little more news surrounding the two teams as well. So
we'll see.
Ricardo, I don't know if you have anything else to add. Any final thoughts you want to throw in here?
Nah, man. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, man. This is always a good time. Love talking Steelers and Eagles. Love talking Eagles and Steelers. And we have come to the end of this episode. So it's been a pleasure, everybody. A lot of fun. We love doing it. If you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, because we're putting more content out there. We're breaking news as it comes out. We'll be updating you as well. And hey, we're always letting you know when our new episodes are coming out. So if you're not following the Instagram and Twitter, you got to do that. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe to us, because we're always putting out this new content. So we'll see you next week, next Friday, as we get closer to training camp, talking about the offensive linemen, breaking down another position group. Until then, thanks for tuning in with us. Have a good week.